Good evening. I am Madeline Tomka, co-chair of the Committee on Lectures. It's an honor for me to introduce tonight's speaker, Kim Jordan. Kim Jordan is the CEO of New Belgium Brewing, the third largest craft brewer in the United States, and is well known for its production of Fat Tire beer. Our guest, a former social worker, helped start. Oops. Sorry. I will not be giving the presentation tonight. She's a former social worker, and she helped start New Belgium Brewing in 1991 in the basement of her family's Fort Collins, Colorado home. The company is well known for its all-encompassing, sustainable approach to business. It strives to evaluate its performance with what Jordan calls a triple bottom line approach. So that measures the environmental, economic, and social effects of the business. Under her leadership, New Belgium has developed a number of social sustainability programs, and this includes employee ownership, open book management, as well as it involves high involvement culture. New Belgium has also demonstrated its commitment to the environment. So not only does New Belgium produce electricity from solar and wind power, it also uses methane harvested from its process wastewater treatment plant. The company also diverts more than 99% of brewery waste from the landfill. So Kim Jordan is on the board of 1% for the Planet, a global movement in which member companies donate at least 1% of their annual net revenues to environmental organizations worldwide. She also serves on the Colorado Renewable Energy Authority. I think she's really great, and I'm honored to share, and please help me in welcoming Kim Jordan.
Thank you so much. It's always nice to have someone do such a thorough introduction, and at the same time you find yourself thinking, oh, don't tell them those things because you'll cover it all and I won't have anything to say here. But hopefully I have some things to give you some perspective about what we do. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much to Pat Miller, who is the director of the lectures program for the university, for thinking of me, and for the terrific students who are, I'm assuming, volunteers, Madeline, Claire, Jeffrey, who these papers are still warm. That's how recently we've printed my notes here, because we had a little fire drill on technology. So, and also thank you for being here today. There are a lot of things you could have done tonight, and thank you for coming to spend some time with me. I've been asked to speak about our experience and perspective in running a socially responsible business. My only other area of significant expertise is in beer, and I'm assuming that they've decided that you know as much about that as I do, so I'll just get that out of the way. We are not drinking beer together this evening. I'm sorry to say, because beer is pretty fabulous, but since you're experts in beer as well, we'll just proceed with what I have to speak about. And I'll talk about how we got into this gig called sustainability and what it means for us and what we've learned along the way. I'll talk about our practice broadly, high involvement culture, employee ownership, environmental advocacy, and leadership. And I'll talk about what we've learned and where we've been challenged. If you have questions along the way, it's fine with me if you want to ask them. They may have a typical protocol where you ask them at the end, and that's okay with me too. But sometimes it's hard to kind of recreate that context when you wait for the last. So I'll leave that up to you. We're all adults here, but feel free to sing out if you have something you'd like to have me address as we go along. And there will be time for questions at the end. So I think it's helpful to first look at social responsibility or sustainability in context. So this is, there are three areas that we look at. Can you guys hear me? I'm a little bit far from the mic. So people, planet, and profits. And some of you may recognize that as the triple bottom line, which is actually a phrase that's been around for a while. We were not familiar with it when we began the process of looking at how it was we were going to run New Belgium. Really, though, to be a sustainable business, you have to have all three of those aspects working in concert. They need to be complementary. It's easy to think in terms of trade-offs. Well, we'll do this, but we won't be able to do that. And really, to get traction, you want all of those things to be feeding the best of all of the other things in a way that contributes to success all the way across the board. So we're not in a green industry. We don't sell a green product, but our strategy is aligned with our environmental and social goals. We're profitable, not in spite of our progressive practices, but in our minds we're profitable because of them. Let me start by telling you a little bit about New Belgium. My then husband, Jeff Liebisch, had been on a mountain bike trip in Europe, and he tried some beers that he thought were pretty terrific. And he came home. He was a home brewer at the time. That's a picture of him right there. He was a home brewer at the time, and he decided to emulate some of the styles that he'd had while he was there, and he was particularly fascinated with Belgian styles. And so he began to play around with this notion of quitting his day job and starting a brewery. We were dating at the time, and honestly, I think he's kind of a shy engineer type, and I think he realized, that I would be the front of the house, so to speak, in that kind of parlance, in business parlance, and he would be the back of the house. And really that worked out well because our skill sets are very complementary. So I am a social worker, as you guys heard, and so for me, talking about who we wanted this baby company to be was a really important step in the process. So before we ever made a barrel of beer, the two of us took a hike in Rocky Mountain National Park, and we took our notebooks along, and we sat down on some boulders. It was a beautiful bluebird kind of day, and we talked about who we wanted our company to be. And these were the four things that we came up with. We were going to produce world-class beers, which in retrospect I think is kind of hilarious, given that, we hadn't yet even made any beer. But, you got to think big, and guess what? Now we produce world-class beers. So, there's perhaps a little gem in there for you if you're thinking about things you want to do in your life. We were going to promote beer culture because in 1991, beer was really still kind of the drink of the knucklehead. It was not something, as it is in Europe, as it is particularly in Belgium, where it has reverence and culture and history, and people take a great deal of pride in their brewing history. So we were among a group of leaders in this country saying that there is something really wonderful and ancient in the craft of brewing. I mean, it is the first or second oldest profession, depending on whom you talk to, both of which happen to involve women because the first brewers in the world were women. So we were going to be environmental stewards, and we were going to have fun. And so that's what we came up with. And you'll notice that there is nothing there about customers, and there is nothing there about coworkers, because at that point, we didn't have either one of those things. And so it didn't even occur to us that maybe we ought to be planning for something bigger than just this little thing that we were going to be doing in our basement. Whoops, I pressed an arrow I didn't want to press. In 1994, I read a book called The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack, who is considered the father of the open book management movement. He's in Springfield, Missouri. From very early on, I knew that it was important to me that we coalesce a group of people who were unusually connected as a community to one another, And I was sort of searching for ways to do that with our very small, at that point, group of coworkers. So I read this book about open book management, and I thought, okay, well, that's interesting, but it's really scary to think about showing your coworkers the books. So we've had a retreat every year since that very first one that was Jeff and me on the boulders in the park. We had a retreat with our coworkers in '95, and I gave them a little quiz. And I said, okay, we made $100 in revenue, and we're going to spend that on raw materials and on labor and on all of the other things that it takes to run a business. What's the money that we have left over after that? Our coworkers, for the most part, said that we probably had about $60 left over out of that $100. And if any of you are Mike's laughing over there, if any of you are familiar with business, you would kill for a $60 net margin. I mean, Pet Rocks, maybe Pet Rocks had that kind of a margin, but over the main, that's nearly impossible to do. What it allowed me to do is to say, you know, they're making up stories about where the money goes. This is another place that we can draw some connection and some show our faith in one another and really have transparency and begin to build this culture of expectation that we are all involved in the business of running the business. And so we jumped in. We started training our coworkers on financial literacy. We later on, I'll get here. Let's see where we go next with this. Later on, we decided it was time to further flesh out those 4 core values and turn them into a more comprehensive set. You can see those here. And that last slide was a heart, and it said, making our love and talent manifest. We have a system that we use for the structure of vision in our company. For us, vision is the bucket. It is not a thing in and of itself. It's the container inside of which we hold our purpose, the thing that we are on the planet to do in the longest haul, the thing that we never achieve, kind of the guiding star. And for New Belgium, our purpose is to operate a profitable brewery, which makes our love and talent manifest. I look at Cheese over here because one of my coworkers is sitting here, and I bet he could tell, you know, that's a really deeply ingrained piece of our culture. So you have to be profitable because you can be as groovy as you want to be, but if you can't keep the doors open, none of that really matters. And we think that it's really important to be loving and to be excellent because we spend a lot of time, all of us, in this endeavor that we call work. And for us, if that does not touch you at your soul, something's wrong with that kind of investment in time. So for us, we want to care deeply about one another, and we want to be very good at what we do. So that's our purpose. We have 10 core values and beliefs. And then we have a mission. We actually finished a year early because we're overachievers, our 2010 mission that we set in 2000. And we have a 2020 mission. Our mission is not something, it's time-bound, it's at least somewhat measurable. It's not something that we share because we feel that it's, you know, part of our competitive engine. But that is what we call our vision, those things. After that, we involve our coworkers in building the strategy at the 3-year level, at the 1-year level, and everyone in the company also does what we call PWOs, personal work objectives. And all of that's transparent. You can find that in our MotherNet to see what's going on in the New Belgium community. And it's a way to keep us very aligned, where everyone knows where we're going and how we're going to behave as we go there. And, you know, a lot of how we're going to behave is we're going to make sure that we're having fun along the way. So every August this is actually, I might be one slide off here. I'm going to peek at the next slide. I'm going to go back to this slide for a minute. So So all of our coworkers are involved in that mission process, helping to develop that, giving input into the annual strategy. Every August, as I said, we have our retreat. Before the retreat starts, we do a SWOT analysis. I'm sure all of you are somewhat familiar with that. It's an opportunity to look at external threats and opportunities and internal strengths and weaknesses. And so we do that. And we start that before the retreat starts. And by the time we get to the retreat, we have what we think are 6 or 8 really important questions for our coworkers to guide us on. So it's in August every year. It's at Planet Bluegrass outside of Boulder, which is just an incredible place. It's always outside. We have 385 coworkers now. Everyone's expected to come. We bring all of our field staff in to be there as well. We break into little groups and we talk about, we move around from section to section, and we talk about those very important questions for the company, and then we roll those up into our planning for strategy for our annual strategy. And then, as I said, that cascades down both into departments and into each person's work plan for the year. There are my coworkers. Let's see what I'm that's why I brought notes, so I can be sure that So one of the first things that we learned is that nurturing a community of coworkers is incredibly powerful. Our coworkers own 41% of the company. They know where all of the money goes. They participate in the strategy. We talk every month about our progress in the strategy. They're financially literate. They're expected to make decisions at the appropriate level. There are some decisions I make. There are a lot of decisions they make. And that's the way that we feel like we have a relationship with our coworkers that is about being in this together. We try to keep that very flat. And I think it's working for us. I think that it's something that's been incredibly powerful. We were on the Wall Street Journal's top 15 corporations in the nation to work for. We were Outside Magazine's Best Employer of the Year 2 years in a row. There's an international survey called World Blue, which is a survey of the world's most democratic workplaces, and we're always in the top echelon of companies in that group. And we're very successful, and we think it's in large measure because of the way that we work with one another. I have this slide in here because I'm sort of transitioning out of the my conversation about our relationship with our coworkers and moving on to more of our environmental work. And this is kind of a cross of those two things. When people have worked for New Belgium for a year, they get a cruiser bike as their 1-year anniversary gift. And we do that because we're big into celebration and ritual. We have ownership ceremonies for the ESOP twice a year where we have mojos and people come up and they talk about what ownership means to them, and they're kind of accepted into our tribe. And another thing we do every month is to make sure that people who have worked with us for a year in that month get their bikes in front of the rest of us so that we can cheer and drink beer and ride bikes and drink beer. So, but we also do this because the bike is important to us. It's not just important to us because of our creation story or because it's on our logo. It's important to us because we think that the bicycle is one of the world's most sustainable inventions, and it's a joyful experience to be a part of. And we really, as you'll see later, like the idea of celebrating the bike. This is another thing that we do called Team Wonder Bike, where we work with our customers to encourage them as well to consider putting the car away more and getting out the bike. So I'm not sure if there is still a Team Wonder Bike website or if you get through it through the New Belgium website. But this was our first brew house. And I show you that, to give you kind of a sense of how things started. This is our current brew house. This brew house, you'll see the tube that goes to the right and into the corner there. That is a heat exchanger. We take the leftover energy from the boil in the kettle, and it goes through a heat exchanger, so that energy goes this way, cold water goes this way, the water becomes hot. We are able then to use that extra thermal energy in our process. Here's our old brew house again, and I put this in not because I've forgotten how to run the slides as it might look, or not to say that we're no longer buying our equipment from Ace Hardware, but this one had a condenser stack on it, a heat exchanger as well. You see that galvanized trash can up there? Inside of that were copper coils, and they did the same. They served that same heat exchanger function. And the reason that I tell you about this is that for sustainability to take hold, leaders have to really demonstrate that they believe in it, and it has to be kind of core. This is another thing we know about our practice and what we do. It has to be core to the organization. So we've been making choices to spend money on energy recovery, energy conservation, those kinds of things, since the very first days in the basement. And we continue to do that today, as I'll show you. But I think that that's been a huge lesson for us, is that it really helps to have people all the way through the organization saying, yes, this is who we are, and this is important to us. And so this is a part of those, those initial core values and beliefs in 1991 said that we were going to be environmental stewards, and this is one of the ways to exhibit that. In 1998, we took a vote with our coworkers about wind power. We were looking for a way to reduce our CO2 emissions, and that was a pretty long time ago for those kinds of conversations. And we were looking at CO2 scrubbers, which is something that you can buy. It's kind of generally an industry thing. But they take plug power, and they're not that efficient. And our municipality had a fledgling wind power program in the hills of Wyoming where the wind really blows. And we started having conversations with them about the possibility of really moving that program along by committing to a 10-year plan to buy all of our energy in wind credits from in actual wind. They actually have a wind farm. So we were concerned, though, because we also have profit sharing with our coworkers, and this had a premium on it. And so we went to our coworkers and said, okay, what do you think? This is something that we think is important. It's consistent with our core values and beliefs, but it may reduce your checks, and we think we need to have that conversation. To a person in that room, we use a system at New Belgium of thumbs for getting consensus on things, and everyone in that room had their thumb up for this. It's kind of become legendary in our organization, and we continuously look for other ways to be sure that we're having not silly conversations, but important conversations. I talk to my coworkers about what we're doing and what we're thinking about in terms of succession. What worries me. There's pretty much nothing that I won't say, that I won't answer with my coworkers. So at that point, when we decided to bring on wind power, we were the largest private purchaser of wind power in the United States. So we were pretty proud of that at that time. Now we have bubbles. We're actually getting another one. Our processed wastewater is rich in nutrients. And this is a really elegant thing because we are able to take that wastewater. We built an anaerobic and an aerobic digester set of ponds with this bubble. And in the anaerobic digestion phase, methane is made. And so we capture that methane in the bubble, and we ship it back to the brewery, which is just kind of this way. And we turn that into thermal and electrical energy. And so about 15% of our energy is produced with a combined heat and power plant by using that methane as a source of power. We have in the last year we actually paid for these, but we're part of a larger demonstration project with the Department of Energy to look at peak load management, because for anyone who's familiar with this kind of geeky stuff, in this country, in order to not invest in more coal-fired power plants, we have to figure out how to manage the time of day when everyone wants to turn on their air conditioning with 3 in the morning when no one is using their air conditioning. And so we are part of a demonstration project where CSU have scientists who can look into our energy loads, and we can turn energy production, we can shed, we can add, so we can help to level out those peaks. It's a fairly new process, and it's fairly sophisticated. And why do we do it? We do it because we are intellectually curious, and we're interested in being pioneers. We feel like if a certain percentage of the technology that we invest in doesn't fail, then we're not sitting out on the far edge of the learning curve, because when you're learning, as you guys know, sometimes you fail. But you also learn a lot about what works and what doesn't work through that process. So this is the largest privately owned solar array in Colorado, and we'll be putting more on in this coming year. Here's our energy philosophy. We think the reason I put this on here is because we're kind of nutty about this. We think it's really important to start with energy conservation. All those bells and whistles are great, but please, for God's sake, turn the lights off. So that's that. In 2007, we realized that we had been doing these things kind of helter-skelter, and we didn't really have much of a plan. We had great intentions, and so we were doing a lot of things, but we hadn't really gotten focused on a methodical way. And so we convened a cross-functional group of our coworkers. There were about 20 people. They're now called the Sustainabilities. And they started the process of developing a sustainability management report. And they started out very broad, talking about what are the problems on the planet, and then they narrowed that to what are the problems that our industry is a part of that makes the planet's problem worse, and then we narrowed it down to what are the things that we're doing that add to this problem, and then we had a framework for sort of looking at the job ahead. And so that was really helpful for us to get a little more organized and directional about what it was we were going to do. And it became pretty clear to us right away that we needed some better baseline measurement about what it is that what our actual carbon footprint is. So we were the first brewery in the United States to do a life cycle assessment. We did it on a 6-pack of Fat Tire. And we were able to see from grain to a beer drinker's glass where all of the embedded energy, embedded resources, and then straight up resource use, where the big nuggets were there. Just a little aside, one of the biggest one is store refrigeration. It's huge. For Pepsi with vending machines, it's huge. And so Then you have an opportunity to think about what kinds of things can we do to make an impact in these areas. And we're talking with brewers about how do we make beer that's more stable, so less beer. We love the craft of brewing, and one of our challenges is to have really full-flavored, delicious beers that don't all need to be refrigerated. So that's something that we're working on. So here's kind of a pie chart of the big pieces of this, and you can see, we've really taken a lot of the impact out at the brewery, and so it leads us to some other solutions, which I'll talk about here in a minute. You can see both our life cycle analysis and our sustainability management system at newbelgium.com if you're interested. I'm leaving the production area, but I can't do so without mentioning beer and Peter Buchart and our love of beer and Peter both, because it is a part of that. We talk about innovation and creativity being a part of our core values. Peter is not encumbered by rules or styles. In fact, he's kind of legendary for not liking styles. One of the beers that he made is Bier de Mars, which for him was the expression in a glass of the essence of the famous architect Victor Horta. So, that's how he kind of goes about thinking about the art and craft of making beer. So we looked at our life cycle analysis. We said, okay, we've done a lot here at the brewery, but our whole sort of end-to-end process leaves something to be desired. It's certainly better than a lot of industries, but there's work to be done here, and we believe in being excellent, right? And we believe in being stewards. So we decided that we needed to do something about that. It's a process. It's never ending. We don't expect to be perfect. That's not even our goal. But we do expect that we can move this process along. So we asked ourselves, what can we do to really work on the global climate crisis? And if we achieve zero waste and we do all of these things, will we really have a significant impact? And this is when we realized that really we could do a lot by making sure that our splash, our practice, has ripples. Because we were squandering some of our ability to really make a difference by pretty much doing what we did, and we talked about it some. We weren't really shy, but it actually took us many years to talk about both our environmental and business best practice. And we decided it was time to say, no, we're going to do some advocacy. We're going to advocate for alternative transportation, for clean and renewable energy, and for healthy watersheds. We've given $1 a barrel to philanthropy for since about 1993, so it's well over $3 million at this point. But we knew that we could, in addition to money, we could use our influence, because beer's kind of one of those crazy archetypal things. People want to, they don't want to talk about door stops or umbrellas, but they do like to know about beer, which we're pleased with. So we started really putting together work on saving the Colorado River, encouraging places. We call it advocacy, these things where we actually do ads in media publications. We were working with groups that were trying to take down some particular dams. And then we started really working in earnest with working with other NGOs and different trusts around the nation to make sure that there were people who were actually looking at this issue in a coordinated kind of way. And this project's been pretty successful. It's in its baby stages, so it has a way to go. But at this point, we raised $500,000, and these are our 3 areas of focus right now: raising awareness, promoting conservation of the Colorado River Basin, and then working on the ecology of the basin as well. So I talked a little bit about our relationship with our coworkers. I talked a little bit about our environmental work, and I'm kind of hitting the highlights of those. I didn't really look at time here. I want to talk a little bit about how we talk about that with people. We are nervous with the word sustainable because it's such a broad catchment as to mean really anything. And we feel like a lot of people, use it without really having much actual backup for the kinds of work that they're doing. And we also recognize the quandary that we're in. On the one hand, we want to promote sustainability and diminished resource consumption. And on the other hand, we want to sell beer, and so really those 2 things are at least somewhat at odds with one another. But we decided again, that our ability to leverage our good work was worth going ahead and having these conversations. And we talked about, okay, what's that going to mean to us? So for us, that was being sure that we walked before we talked about it. Only promoting what we've really achieved, also admitting, you saw the slide that said we're New Belgium and we pollute, also admitting that we have a lot of work to do. That was very freeing for us to feel like it's okay to say, yeah, there's a lot to be done here and we have an impact. And it earns us transparency and trust that we thought was important. We also think that it's important to be I don't know if light is exactly the word I want to use, but hopeful. There is a lot of sustainable message out there that is pretty depressing. And it is a pretty pressing and somewhat depressing topic, but beer should not be depressing. And we also think there's something to be said for sort of, taking the conversation to another place that's a little bit less sort of dire and dour all the time. We also try to make sure that some of the solutions that we offer are simple and incremental, that all of us can do these kinds of things. And we feel like we've made ripples in doing so, and that's been very important to us. As a part of that, we do Tour de Fat because it gives us an opportunity to bring in partners who are working on sustainability. We typically have nonprofits involved in our Tour de Fats that are very involved in alternative transportation. We try to make them zero waste events so that we're doing, as I said, we're walking before we're talking about them. It's also just a really good time. One of the things we do is to find someone in every community where we have a Tour de Fat who would be willing to give up their car for a bicycle for a year. They actually give us the title to the car, and we have a really sweet custom commuter. It's not our cruiser. It's a bike that someone can use with a trailer to make sure that they can really get around for a year. And it has a big, again, ritual aspect to it with, incense and priests and people on poles, and because we want people to notice that we think that this is important. Here is the last thing that we've learned in doing this, that if it's not fun, it's not sustainable. And for us, the opportunity to really dive in with reckless abandon, be silly, be excellent, be loving, build community with one another, encourage others to join us, work with our partners out in the trade to change minds and hearts about the kind of work that there is to be done. Excuse me. We think, excuse me. We think that business has a powerful role to play. And you may have noticed in our core values and beliefs that one of them is to be a business role model. And someone asked me today what my biggest surprise was. I don't know what happened here, sorry. And for me, the biggest surprise has been this incredible opportunity that we get to use profits to do really interesting work with people. So, so we're having fun. We're trying to be sustainable. We do that by being loving, profitable, and excellent. And that's how we do things in this sustainable gig at New Belgium Brewing Company. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Sorry about the choking part. Do you guys have questions? Now that I don't have to see my papers, I can take my glasses off. Sir?
Yes, I wondered if your work in sustainability and all these new novel techniques, does that impact sales or costs?
His question was, does our work in sustainability impact sales or costs or both? And the interesting thing about that is it impacts sales, I think, positively. There are people who say to us, it's certainly not, even a vast minority, but there are people who say, I buy your beer because you stand for what I believe in, and I'm going to support that. It does impact costs as well, but we feel like some of that is a long. I didn't bring beer, and so they're leaving. I'm sorry. They told me I couldn't. No, they didn't. I didn't even ask them. We think that some of those CapEx investments, even though they have a long-term payoff, the headline today was that gas is going to be $5 a gallon. We believe in being leaders, and so it's meaningful to us, and we're nice and profitable, and we have a great group of coworkers, and we feel like it's working out pretty well for us. Any other questions? The question was, do we do anything with carbon dioxide from fermentation? We actually do not. We don't have a scrubber. We have talked about it, and it's still, the jury's out on how effective you actually end up being with that. But we do calculate it as a part of our life cycle analysis, and we do some work to offset it as well.
I had a question. What is the most fun thing you've done at work on a bicycle?
I don't know if I can tell you that. One of the fun things we do on a bicycle is, because one of the things I do on a bicycle I love to ride bikes. I always get that little kid feeling when I get on a bike, always. But one of the things we do is we take distributors, Mike Brewington's here, he's in Iowa, we take them on a bike ride to go out to a restaurant when they're visiting the brewery. And many of those people haven't been on a bike in, 30, 40, 50 years. And that is really fun. Not because we're causing them pain, because it's only like an 8-block ride, so it's not that far. But because you see them go, wow, this is actually pretty fun. I'm having a good time. I don't know why I never do this. And, and then I'll run into them and they'll say, since that time I've been riding a bike more, and I make choices to perhaps get on a bike instead of get in my car. And when people are making those choices, that's fun for me, because I'm kind of a dork. So, sir?
Hi.
Hi.
It's about a year since Fat Tire, which, by the way, everyone I've ever talked to who saw the name first time calls it Flat Tire.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's about a year since Fat Tire's been in Iowa. What took you so long? I also think that people here would like to know, you can take a tour of your brewery. I did that with Bernie from Marshalltown.
Nice. Bernie is still hard at it. I saw him today.
All right. Well, tell him, people here remember him.
Good. He rode in Ragbri, too.
Yes, he was very proud of that. But I was at a restaurant in Keystone, and the bartender there swore that when you went from the original brew process and equipment to the new, the flavor changed. What did you do to, try to not have that happen?
Well, so you had a couple of questions there. The what took us so long, I think, is actually germane to this conversation, because we try to be very good at what we do. And there are breweries that will just sort of send beer. We don't really do that, because we believe in being here and being a part of this state and these communities, and being of good service to our distributors. And so we have to, and growing at a rate that keeps us still having fun. And so that takes time, and we hope that people will be patient with us, and most of the time they are, and sometimes they're not. Remember earlier I said that beer is very archetypal, and people seem to have a deep-seated interest in beer. That's where that thing about, it doesn't taste as good as it tasted, it is much more consistent. In the original brewery, in my basement, I would sew muslin socks. I would go to the fabric store and buy a bolt at a time, and I would cut it, rip it into strips, and sew these long strips of muslin, and then I would cut them, and then I would make all of the ends on them, and that was our filtration. Our filtration is much more. You saw the trash can on the kettle. The filter was the equivalent of the trash can on the kettle, and our new filters are the equivalent of. So in terms of quality of beer and the ability of the beer to travel and those kinds of things, it's much, much better. Beer is a food product, however, and just, in wine people talk about appellations, or vintages, it's from this year and this area of the grapes. Beer is just the same. So every year's crop is different than last year's crop, and honestly, I think we would do ourselves a service to embrace that, rather than, you can get very consistent beer that is always going to be like the last one from a couple of very large breweries in this country, and that's great. They do an unbelievably great job of that. And we do a great job of thinking about Victor Horta, and we use August Busch IV came to our brewery once, and we were talking about the 8 different yeast strains that we have. And he looked at us like, 8 different? They have 1. They have 1. We have 8. It's a pain in the ass to have 8 different yeast strains. But yeast imparts a particular character in beer. And if you want to have a breadth of interesting kinds of beer, we have the largest wood cellar in the United States at this point. And Peter was telling, we're investing in some new wooden foeders, they're called. He said when we get those put in, we will have probably the second largest wood cellar for beer in the world. Just, yeah. So I don't know if I really answered your questions, but there is mythology about beer that makes its way out into the world in comments like, it's not nearly as good as it used to be. There's also a lot of connection between our nose, our tongue, and our brain. So, sir?
Which is your more important brand nowadays? Is it New Belgium or is it Fat Tire? And have you seen those shifting over the course of the years?
We made some choice. Would you give me a high sign at some point that you want me to stop? Because I'll just go on until you're telling me to quit or they're bored of me, either one. We made a decision years ago. It was kind of, we didn't know squat when we started branding beer, honestly. My first dolly or hand truck of beer that I was taking into a local liquor store in Fort Collins, first delivery, the guy says, "What's your price point?" And I'm thinking, price point. I hope I know what he means by price point, because we really didn't know anything. So the whole New Belgium Fat Tire thing had a time when it was really problematic for us, because I'd say, "Hi, I'm from New Belgium Brewing Company," and people would go, And I'd say, "We make Fat Tire," and they'd say, "Oh, we know your beers." And we made a decision a long time ago to brand New Belgium because we felt like Fat Tire might be what brings people into our house, as it were, but New Belgium is what causes them to want to know more. And then we thought, oh, what have we done? This is New Belgium. It's hard to say, and people don't understand. And Fat Tire, they call it Flat Tire, and what are we doing? Now we think that combo of New Belgium and Fat Tire and all of it, and Ranger, and all of the Lips of Faith series, and all of the other things that we do. Now we think that's a really sweet spot for us, so we feel pretty good about that. Sir?
Take on the current three-tier system as it is right now, and you got to be able to do it sustainability with your three-tier partners.
The question was, what's our take on the three-tier system, and do we work on sustainability with our distributor partners? My take on the three-tier system is a little bit like capitalism. It is not perfect, but it is absolutely the best system that we have. Because you go to Europe where there is tied house that the brewer can own the bar, and your choices are very limited. And you go into a bar and it will be all, what I left InBev products, for instance, when they were on their own. And, they don't have the vibrant. The best place in the world to drink beer right now is this country right here. We have the most vibrant craft beer scene of anywhere in the world. And that's in part because of that system. Forgive me, Mike, but I have to say the other side, which is that some of the laws that were enacted for distributors a long time ago, when they were really getting the squeeze by the big five, was about 5 breweries at that time, worked well for them going up to very big brewers, but it doesn't work well for us going down to little brewers, because we are in many states where you choose a distributor and you cannot get out for love or money. You can offer to pay and they can say no, and that is the end of the conversation. So you have a business model and there's nothing you can do about that. So that's broken in my mind. And I think most rational beer distributors, beer wholesalers would say the same thing. And then your other question, one of the advocacy things that we are doing is to work more with our distributors. When they call us and say, we want to talk about things that we could do, no idle truck policies, maybe we're going to use some electric trucks, some biodiesel, what do we do about, a greater degree of recycling? How can we get less of your point of sale in our warehouse that ends up just going into the dumpster? Those kinds of conversations. We love to have those conversations with distributors because that's how we move that needle downstream from the brewery. So we're very interested in that. And we also I'm on the board of our industry trade association, and we work with that group to make sure that we're having conversations about things, plug your ears there, buddy, like national bottle bills. Maybe we need to talk about recycling across the land because the energy that's used in virgin glass is outrageous compared to the energy used in recycled bottles, for instance. Sorry. Okay, is there a woman in here with her hand up? Can I get a woman back there? I'll be with you there.
Appropriate you should ask, because my question was, as a woman CEO, have you faced any particular challenges or opportunities, or do you have comments on that angle of running a business as a woman?
Generally, not in the beer space. I'm just going to speak more generally. I find that people do sort of automatically assume that there must be a man there doing the real work kind of thing. And I get that a lot, and sometimes it is sort of annoying, like, really? For instance, Jeff really stopped working at New Belgium in 2000, and we were married until 2009. Even after we got divorced, people would say to me, so what's Jeff doing at the brewery now? It's like, well, Jeff hasn't been working, and it's just that sort of assumption that people sometimes make that can sometimes be annoying, and totally by happenstance, no plan at all. The CFO, COO is a woman. The director of sustainability, who used to be the COO, and before that she was the CFO, is also a woman. So we have some great men in our company as well, but we have some pretty damn powerful, competent women in our organization. In the craft brewing industry, I work with these fabulous men. I wish there were more women. I am often sitting at a table with only men. And I don't know, they're just like my brothers, so I don't really even think about it much. One time, a distributor that we didn't choose in a state neighboring you guys told our sales guy there, well, I want to talk to that lady boss. That lady boss, what's her name again? And he was like, yeah, I don't think you want to talk to the lady boss. So I like men. I like women, too. Other questions? This gentleman I said I'd get back to him, so I'll get to you.
With your what impact has your sustainability, green, environmental efforts had on other businesses and other entities in Fort Collins?
The question was, what has our sustainability impact had on other businesses in Fort Collins? Both at the business level and at the residential level, wind power has gone kind of off the charts in our town. Bicycling in our town went from this, just kind of nascent thing to the streets are filled with bicycles in our town. We get 125,000 people through our brewery a year for tours, which we love because for us the reason for that is to talk to people about the kinds of, we want to be a business role model. Remember, that was one of our core values and beliefs. And every time I get an opportunity to talk to you or people come to the brewery to see what we do, it has an impact. We meet with a lot of people in our city, who want to be looking at their own practice and choosing some new paths. We do a lot of allowing nonprofits to use our space to spread the good word of whatever their issues are. So, did that answer your question? The journey that led to our 99% diversion rate. I actually think our diversion rate is slightly lower than that, in part because we took out, this is one of those places, I think that was old copy perhaps, and this is one of those places where you admit, that you're not that things aren't exactly the way they might have looked in that. It's like 97%. And that's in part because we took out all of the spent grain. Because spent grain is heavy because it's used to be soaked in water. And so if you do a diversion rate based on poundage, we recycle essentially all of our spent grain by selling it to cattle farmers. Well, you've really just tipped your, you have a number that's meaningless because it's so powerfully tipped one way by spent grain. So without spent grain, we're at about 97 something. So what was the process of that? That's kind of interesting, because for me, sometimes recycling bugs me, honestly, because we're starting to get some good traction on landfill, picking up the biogas from landfill to try to actually do something with trash. The thing that bugs me about recycling is I recycled. That's it. That's all I have to do. I don't have to turn the lights off. I don't have to, think about my purchasing habits. I don't have to, buy organic anything, because I recycle. I'm an environmentalist. I recycle. That's a problem. And so when people came and said, well, let's set up these bins and, we'll recycle tea bags. And, we have compost stations all over the brewery. I was like, well, okay. But they were right, because what it did was sent another signal among 100 signals about our intent. And our intent is to get after it. And so if one way to show that is through recycling, well, so be it. I do things like hang up colored copies and say, that no one ever came to pick up. Did you really need to do this? They love me for that kind of stuff. I don't really do that, but I have done it in the past. It's been a couple of years. The question was, apart from reading the one book on open book management, and I hope I did not imply that I've read one. Yeah, I've read one book in my history of CEO, and it was in 1994. It's all I ever really needed to know. I read lots of books about lots of subjects. And you know what? Sometimes you're reading a book about something that is not at all germane to whatever it is you're thinking is important that you should be working on, and something leaps out at you. I love those moments. We have a lot of people involved who have really good ideas. We talk to the people at World Blue and say, what are you hearing about that's new and interesting? We go to the National Center for Employee Ownership Conference, or to other ESOP conferences or open book management conferences. Our management group goes on a road trip every year where we go visit another company, and we say, that's not in our space, and we say, we'll tell you everything you want to know about what we do that we think makes us successful, as long as you allow us to ask you questions as well. We find that to be pretty powerful. We do a lot of just different ways of working on it, but one of the biggies is letting a lot of people, at 1 year you get a bike. That was a coworker who was a part of then our OBM committee. This was years ago in the early 90s. He said, "This is something I think we should do," and I said, "Okay." And some things start as simply as that. The 5-year anniversary, when you've worked with New Belgium for 5 years, you get a trip to Belgium. Every year I take a group of people there so that we can kind of go to the mother country and understand beer culture there. So that one was my idea. We have different, at 10 years, are you familiar with Kiva.org? It's a micro-lending group. At 10 years, you get $1,000 in travel certificates and $1,000 in Kiva.org bucks, so that you can have that sort of entrepreneurial experience of, at 10 years, you also get a 4 to 6 week paid sabbatical. So, one more question? Okay. How about this woman here? You didn't ask did you ask a question? Okay. The question was, will I be writing a book? Well, since I read one, I have some experience with this. We were actually talking about books in the car on the way here. We talk about it. At this point, I've got so many things. I've still got a kid at home. One of the things we have decided is when we write a book, we will write it ourselves. That, you know, we get lots of letters from people who are professional writers who would like to write a book for us, and we feel like we are the best stewards of our voice. So that will be something that we do. It looks like I am supposed to say thank you very much. So thank you very much for your time.
There will be a reception, and you can ask more questions. So thank you again to Kim Jordan. And